What about my personal experience? So if you've watched a couple of these videos already, you know that there are several answers to the question, is God real? And if so, how would I know it? What I like about that is the God of the universe didn't leave us on our own. He didn't say, just trust. I gave you a brain, but check it at the door. He's filled the world and the Bible with answers to the questions we ask, and one of the most commonly asked questions is God real? So we've already said, well, the creation points to a creator, the design of the creation points to the type of designer he is, the fact that there are moral standards in this world point to a moral standard giver, and then the life of Jesus, who claimed to be God, gives pretty strong evidence that there must be a God as well. I want to give you another answer to the question, how do we know that God is real? And it's a little bit weaker answer. I concede that because this is a bit of a subjective answer. And the answer is, we can believe that God is real in part because of the personal experience that many people, billions of people, have had with him. Now, it's a weak answer because you could say, well, I have this tomato growing behind my ear and therefore I believe X, Y, and Z. It can be manufactured from your own sleep or your own imagination. But if you think about it, billions of people have had an encounter where they would claim that the encounter was with the real and true and living God. For instance, for me, on January 20th, 1971, I accompanied some friends from my swim team to a coffee house meeting about 45 minutes south of my house, where I encountered God in a very real way. I had not thought much about a personal relationship with God, but the people at that coffee house had a personal relationship with God, and I left there wanting what they had. So in the front seat of my coach's VW Bug, I invited Christ into my life and everything changed for me. You can call that subjective, but I woke up the next morning going, wow, I feel a sense of peace, I feel a sense of hope. And you could say, well, you wanted to have those things, but I really didn't. I didn't go there seeking anything. I went to the meeting that night because I wanted to hang out with my friends. What I found changed everything for me. And that next morning when I woke up, and I said, did this really happen to me? I actually said the words out loud, God, are you real, and are you really in my life right now? And I heard this still small voice, yes, Hal, I am. I am here and I am with you. And I got chills down my spine. It was like God was, in a bit of a mystical, but in a very real way, revealing himself to me. It's not just my story. The story is true for people all throughout history. There's a guy in the Old Testament named Naaman. He's a Syrian general who contracts the disease of leprosy, which back then was a death sentence. And one of the slaves in his house says, hey, there's a God in Israel who could cure you. So if you read the book of 2 Kings chapter 5, there's this elaborate story of what Naaman goes through to wash and be cleansed according to the prophet of God's words that he ought to do. And he's a skeptic to the very end, till the moment he fulfills all that the prophet tells him to do. And then his leprosy is cured. And he says in 2 Kings chapter 5, verse 15, now I know there is no God in all the world except in Israel. I mean, he just becomes convinced because of personal experience. You weren't there, I weren't there, but for Naaman it was a very real thing. There's another guy in the Old Testament, a king, a very powerful king named Nebuchadnezzar, who has a stunning personal experience with God as well. Nebuchadnezzar gets struck down with this thing called boanthropy, and when he wakes up from it months later, he realizes there was a God who was trying to get my attention, and he did. Earlier in his life, he has a dream that he can't figure out, so he summons a prophet of God named Daniel, and Daniel interprets the dream for him. It's a complicated dream. You can read about it in Daniel chapter 2. But Daniel gives him exactly what he was dreaming about, and he says, wow, surely, Daniel 2:47, surely your God is the God of gods and the King of kings and a revealer of mysteries, for you are able to reveal this mystery. I remember when we first started the church that I pastor, a guy named Greg started coming, and Greg said to me, hey, can I talk to you? I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God. So we started going out to lunch, and we had conversations kind of like this one. I listened, he talked. We shared logic. We shared stuff from the Bible. And about 3 weeks into our ongoing conversation, Greg said to me, you know what? I actually am not an atheist. I have always known there was a God, and I've had this sense that His hand is on my shoulder. Well, Greg received Christ soon thereafter. The Bible says God has set eternity in the hearts of men. There's evidence all around, but there's evidence within you that whispers, God is real. Every culture on earth believes in some sort of God. That alone is a pretty compelling evidence, not necessarily for who God is, but that God is. And God's promise is, if you will seek me, you will find me if you seek me with all your heart. So if you've never done this before, what I'd encourage you to do is just pray this really simple prayer. God, if you're real, reveal yourself to me. And when He does that, which He will, because He's promised to do so, you will say, like I'm saying now, I know there's a God because I've experienced Him personally.